Krishna Kirtana Ganana Tanapano Premamritam Manidhi
Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksuranmilitanyena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manabhistam Stavidanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupam Karamaya Dadanti Swapadantikam. First of all, I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Diksha and Shiksha Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Asatara Satasisi Mad, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Then I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Shiksha and Sannyas Guru, Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Asatara Satasisi Mad, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj. Then I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of my Shiksha Gurus, Srila Gaur Govinda Goswami Maharaj and Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharti Goswami Maharaj. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of the Sri Arupanuga Guru Varga, Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur Prabhupada, Srila Gorakishore Das Babaji, and Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur. I offer my humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of Sri Krishna Bhagavan, the speaker of Bhagavad Gita, and to Sri Arjuna, the hearer of Bhagavad Gita, and to the Srimad Bhagavad Gita itself, and to all of the great acharyas, starting with the original Srila Sridhar Maharaj, and Sri Ramanujacharya, Sri Madhvacharya, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Baldev Vijayabhushan, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj, and Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, who have written commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita to illuminate and elucidate the great teachings within the scripture. And I offer my obeisances unto all the Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis who are present here today. My Dandavat Pranam. So, we discussed the first few verses from chapter 4, following the narrative, okay, based on the 16 questions that were asked, that are being asked by Arjuna throughout the course of the Bhagavad Gita, which were discussed in verse 54, purport by Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. So we came up to verse 4:4. Aparam bhavato janma. How am I to understand that you previously instructed this science to Vivaswan? So this is the fourth question, and it's in the fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And we discussed the previous verses prior to the question. And those previous verses had to do with the parampara. How Krishna established the parampara by speaking to Vivaswan, and Vivaswan to Manu, Manu to Ikshvaku, etc. And then Arjuna asked this question, that Vivaswan exists before you exist, in terms of age, looking at it from that. The sun god Vivaswan is senior by birth to you. So then, that's when Krishna explains, Sri Bhagavan Uvacha, Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tavacharjuna. The Blessed Lord said, many, many births both you and I have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So we discussed some of these points We discussed how Krishna appears again and again. We discussed how he says in verse number 6, although I am unborn and my transcendental body never deteriorates, and although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my original transcendental form. And verses similar to this will be spoken later in other chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna declares his transcendental position. As we discussed in the second chapter, our gross physical body is made of 5 material elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Our subtle material body is made of 3 elements: mind, intelligence, and false ego. And we, the soul, live within the subtle body, which is connected to the gross body through the 7 chakras. And we, the soul, we, the individual soul within this body, are spread all over the subtle and gross body via the expression of consciousness, which is expressed from us, the original spiritual soul. So there's a difference between our physical body and our subtle body, between our subtle body and our soul, between our physical body and our soul, who we are. There's a difference. The physical body and the subtle material body are both temporary. But the soul, we, the soul, the original spiritual personality, is eternal. We have the same quality of spiritual nature as Sri Krishna Bhagavan because we are directly his parts and parcels. We come from Krishna. So because we come from Krishna, therefore, we, in fact, have those same qualities of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. But the quantity of that quality is infinitesimal in comparison to Krishna's infinite nature. For Krishna, there's no difference between his outside and his inside, between the form that you see before you and his inner personality. There's no gross physical body or subtle material body or anything of that nature. Krishna's body is Krishna. Krishna's mind is Krishna. Krishna's intelligence is Krishna. Krishna's ego is Krishna. Krishna's spiritual prowess, Krishna is Krishna. He is Krishna through and through. There is no difference between Krishna's inside or outside. So therefore, when he appears in this world, he is coming here in his original spiritual transcendental form. And he appears here, as he says, from millennium to millennium, in order to establish religious principles, to bless the saintly religious people, to remove irreligious principles from the face of the earth, and to remove those miscreants, duskritana, those persons who are promoting irreligiosity and who are also corrupting the moral fiber and spiritual consciousness of the general population. Krishna then says, Janma karma chame divyam, evam yo vetti tatvata, tyaktva deham punar janma, naitimam eti so arjuna. The one who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take birth again in the material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. So, Krishna's promise to the devotees, if they know, those who know. Knowing is very deep. It means that we actually have to have some spiritual perception and experience of Krishna's transcendental nature. And those who know this will not take birth again in this material world. Krishna also says in the 10th verse that Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me and taking refuge in me, many, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me, and thus they attained transcendental love for me. So here, he's defining what it means to know him. To know him means to be free from attachment, fear, anger, being fully absorbed and taking refuge in him. These are the qualifications to say that we know Krishna's birth and appearance are eternal and that they are not mundane or temporary. They're transcendental. These are the qualities. So now we're going to start with verse number 11. And this is important verse, very, very important verse, because it is greatly misquoted, misunderstood, and poorly explained in general by people who teach Bhagavad Gita. Ye tam mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajami aham mamavart manuvartante manushya partha sarvatha. All of them. Who's all of them? All those persons who surrender unto me. But here, Krishna is saying all of them as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. Everyone follows my path in all respects, O son of Pritha. As they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. So this is a very key and important point, because if we were to say that, as it's been interpreted, many people interpret this to mean it's all one. Whether you worship Krishna, or Durga, or Shiva, or Ganesha, or Surya, or whoever you worship, however you worship, it doesn't matter. As you surrender to God, whatever way you surrender to God, you follow God's path in all respects, and therefore you will go to God. This is their interpretation of this verse. Grossly misinterpreted, because the statement, as you surrender unto me, as they surrender unto me, I reward accordingly. He specifically qualifies the statement. If you surrender unto Krishna by worshiping the ancestors, the Pitris, then when you die, you will go to the ancestors. This is talked about later on. If you try to surrender to a superior power of God by worshiping ghosts, you will go to the ghosts. If you try to worship God as a superior power by worshiping various demigods for material gain, then you will go to the places of the demigods. But those who worship Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the spiritual world, either as Vishnu in Vaikuntha or as Krishna in Goloka, they will go to Krishna. They will go to the spiritual world. They will transcend this material world and go beyond this material world to the spiritual world. So, Krishna is rewarding everyone. And everyone is following his path. He says, everyone follows my path in all respects. What he means is, according to how you surrender, you are on the path toward me. Maybe you are still at the initial stage of pure narcissism, where you feel everything is accomplished by your own energy, your own power, your own self. Or maybe you've finally come to the stage of understanding that you need help outside of yourself, and therefore you worship some superior entity to get help, to get blessings. For those in the mode of ignorance, that superior entity may be the ghosts. For those, or some other entities of that nature. For those in the mode of ignorance, some people may worship the ancestors because they're so attached to the physical, bodily platform. And so out of that ignorance and out of that attachment, they try to worship those personalities, those ancestors, those persons whom they have physical attachment for from being involved with them within this particular lifetime. For those in the mode of passion, you worship various demigods to obtain more and more pleasures in the material world. And for those in the mode of goodness, who are trying to attain transcendence, then those persons will worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, and Krishna, according to the rules and regulations of the Sampradaya, which they're initiated in, as has been previously discussed. And then, by this process, one will get to give up attachment, fear, anger, and other materially negative emotions. And by giving up these negative emotions, then one will come to know Krishna's nature, his transcendental nature, of his appearance and his disappearance in due course, and activities in due course. They will come to understand, they will come to know for certain Krishna's transcendental appearance and activities and his position, that his form is not different from him, that his inside is the same as his outside, that there's no difference for Krishna. They will get to know this, and therefore at the time of death, they will go to the spiritual world. They will go to see Krishna, as Krishna promises here in the Gita. But, as he shows later on in different verses of the Gita, if you worship ghosts, or ancestors, or demigods, or anyone but me, then you will go to those places where those entities that you have worshipped are residing. You will not come to me. To come to me, you have to worship me. And he defines what that worship is in the 9th, 10th, and 11th chapter. So, now we come to a very, very, very important verse. A verse which is in regard or in connection with the previous verse. We'll talk about that one first. Men in this world desire success in fruitive activities, and therefore they worship the demigods. Quickly, of course, men get results from fruitive work in this world. So here, Krishna is saying, as I've spoken already, I reward you accordingly. If you have desire for success in fruitive activities, material sense enjoyment, economic development, and pleasure, then by worshiping the different demigods, I will make your faith strong, and I will give you the opportunity to achieve that goal. Because it is better than being ignorant and narcissistic and thinking everything that happens is done by my own endeavor, and that there's no deity above me that's giving me blessings. to make any progress in life. But this is not the process of achieving the lotus feet of Sri Krishna, of understanding Krishna's transcendental appearance and activities. And so this verse is given right after Yeyata Mam Prapadyante as a qualification for the previous verse, to make it clear exactly what Krishna means when he says, I reward you accordingly. You want fruit of activities? You worship the demigods? I'll give you that. So he immediately qualifies his statement to clarify the point. Now, to the very important verse number 13. This is important on so many levels. This is the famous Chaturvanyam Mayam Shishtam Gunakarma Vibhaga Saha. Tasya Kartaham Api Mam Vidya Kartaram Avyayam. According to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. And although I am the creator of the system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Now, why is this verse so important? Because in ancient India, as at one point, before there was written scriptures, scriptures could only be heard. And the persons who would hear them and recite them were the Brahmins. This is how you receive scriptural knowledge. So if a person wanted to hear scripture, he had to go to a Brahmin to hear it. And if he wanted to learn scripture, he would have to hear from the Brahmin. If he was not born in a Brahmin family, then he could not execute the duties of a Brahmin. If he was not born in a Kshatriya family, he could not execute the duties of a Kshatriya. I'll explain what all these mean: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. So, at a certain point, what happens is these four ashrams, particular, the Brahminical ashram, or the Brahminical varna, these four varnas, the Brahminical varna, became concerned because scriptures started to be written down. And once you had books, a person could obtain a book and read the book, and now the Brahmin was no longer involved. Before, you couldn't get the information unless you heard it from the Brahmin and gave some donation. Now, their business was threatened because someone could read the book, learn how to perform the ritual, learn the story or the pastime, recite it to others, read it to others, perform the ritual themselves, and cut out the Brahmin. And so an emphasis started being made on the concept of being a born Brahmin, a Brahmin priest. The Brahmins are the priests of society. They constitute about 2%, maybe 3% of society. And they're the ones who give the education to society in all facets. And originally, all education in society came from the Brahminical class of people. Then there was the Kshatriyas, which make up about 10 to 15% of society. And they're the ones who did the administration, and they're also the ones who performed the task of being the warriors, the army, for protecting the general population and for executing the governance of the society so that everybody else could manage their affairs nicely. The Vaishyas constituted about 30%. And they're the merchants, the bankers, the agriculturalists. They're the people who performed the tasks that took care of the basic needs of society in terms of bread and money, etc. And then the Sudras made up the 50%, the other 50%. So 30% Vaishya, about 15 to 18% Kshatriya, 2 to 3% Brahmin. That makes up about 50%, and then the rest are the Sudras. The Sudras are the laborer caste. These are the people who know how to do the artisans, who know how to do all kinds of artistic work, sculpture, paint, construction, and plowing the fields, and all of the different laboring work that is required for the maintenance of society. This is done by the Sudras. So these are the 4 varnas, okay? And then the 4 ashrams are brahmachari, which is the celibate students who are studying, and then grihastha, which are the married people that drive the economics of the society. And then there is vanaprastha, which are the retired people that engage in preparing for their last part of their life, for their death, by performing spiritual practices and visiting holy places and purifying their consciousness of activities they performed during their life. And then there is the sannyasis, who make up a very small percentage, like the Brahmins, persons who remain completely celibate. They don't have a relationship. Either the vanaprasthas, they're retired, but they're with their wives. But the sannyasis are retired completely from all relationship to family, and they spend their time only studying and teaching and educating others in the science of spiritual life. So when the Brahmin priests saw that there was books that acted as an undercurrent for sabotaging their livelihood, their occupation, their income, there began this conception, this teaching that if you're not born in a Brahmin family, then you're not a Brahmin. If you're born a Kshatriya, warrior, then you're always a warrior. If you're born a Vaishya, you're always a Vaishya. If you're born a Sudra, you're always a Sudra. This is who you are. This is your karma. You have to accept this. And that is based on your birth. And there's nothing that can be done to change that. But this is not acceptable based on this very verse. This very verse actually argues against that point. Because it says, Chaturvanyam mayam shrishtam guna karma, according to their work, according to their activities, according to their consciousness. Then we recognize that they are either Brahmins or Kshatriyas or Vaishyas or Sudras. Not according to birth. There are many verses which emphasize this point. Aho bata swapacho to garian yajjivagre vartate namatubhyam tapus tapaste juhuvu shushnor aryan. So in this way, this verse is stating that, aho, it is very wonderful. Aho bata swapacho to garian, that those persons who are born as dog eaters, which are considered very low caste in society. Yajjivarge vartate namatubhyam, that the holy name is constantly vibrating on their tongue. Jivagre. Jiva means tongue. Yajjivagre vartate namatubhyam, that the name, the holy name of God is constantly being vibrated upon their tongue. So, how is that possible? How could someone who is not born, because this is the whole principle that the Brahmins are teaching, is that if you're born in a Brahmin family, then you get the proper samskars, the proper impressions, and that birth is based on the previous activities that you've done in previous lives. And therefore, now you are taking birth in this life as a Brahmin, which means that you're born with the qualifications of a Brahmin from your previous life. And therefore you can execute Brahminical activities in this life due to the fact that you're carrying those impressions with you from the previous life. On one level, this conception has merit. However, it doesn't mean that only the persons who are born in a Brahminical family carry Brahminical impressions with them from the previous life. You could be born in any family and carry those impressions with you. This is given in one story where a sage is approached. He's a great rishi, Brahmin, sage, and he's approached by a young boy, about 8 years old. And he asked the rishi and the Brahmin that, will you teach me? Will you educate me? Will you train me? I want to be educated in life so that I can have a good life. So the sage says, okay, who is your father? The boy says, I don't know. I never met my father. He said, okay, go and ask your mother who your father is. And then return and tell me who is your father and what is his name. So the boy goes to the mother and he tells her, I've approached this great rishi to teach me and he's willing to educate me. But he wants to know who my father is and what his name is. So can you tell me who is my father and what is his name? So the mother said, it's not possible, because I had so many lovers. So I don't know which lover impregnated me with you. It could have been any one of 3, 4, 5 different men. So I don't know who is your father. So then the boy goes back to the sage and he tells him. The sage says, have you asked your mother? Yes, I've asked my mother. Did your mother tell you? Yes, my mother told me. She said she doesn't know who my father is because she had relations with several men. Therefore, she doesn't know who is my father. So then the sage says, okay, I will teach you and educate you as a Brahmin. And the boy said, why? He said, because if you were Kshatriya, you would have been too proud to admit that you didn't know who your father was. And if you were a Vaishya or a Sudra, you would have lied But because you're a Brahmin by nature, you told me the truth. That your mother doesn't know who your father is because she had so many lovers. Only a Brahmin would tell me the truth. Therefore, I will train you as a Brahmin. So it depends on the consciousness. Guna karma vibhagasaha. What is the consciousness of the living being? We have seen in the Western world so many people who have become devotees of Krishna, and they perform different Brahminical practices like puja, fire yagyas, etc. And they have a natural inclination to do all of these things. So where does that natural inclination come from? Where does that ability to do those things come from? It comes from the consciousness and the impressions in their previous life. Therefore, we can understand that those impressions can be handed down even to people who are not born in Brahminical families. They can be born in non-Brahmin families, or non-Sudra families, or non-Vaishya, whatever family they may be born in. If they have an inclination to do certain work, then that's what they'll do. Because that is their consciousness based on the impressions that they received from their previous lifetime's activities. So in this way, the concept that Krishna is giving here is not based on birth. It is based on quality of the consciousness. Gun karma, the quality of karma, work. Work is based on the quality of consciousness, and consciousness is based on previous life impressions that we have accumulated over many births. Therefore, taking up the process of Brahminical activity or Kshatriya activity or Vaishya activity is based on these things. Okay? It is based on the quality of work, not the quality of birth. This verse argues against that point. And a whole bhata swapacho to gariyan yajrivagre vartate namatubhyam tapus tapaste juhuvu shashnor arya. Those swapachos, those dog eaters, are considered Aryans. Why are they Aryans? Because it is understood that in their previous births they have already performed tapus tapaste juhuvu shashnor arya. They have already performed all kinds of ritualistic sacrifices. They have performed all kinds of austerities and all kinds of religious ceremonies in their previous births. Due to some karmic activity, they had to take birth in this particular time as a swapacho, a dog eater, but in fact, their nature is that they are Brahmins, or that they are more than Brahmins, they are devotees. They are devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Aho, how wonderful it is. Aho bhata swapacho to gariyan yajivagre vartate namatubhyam. Another verse that is given about the qualification for someone to give initiation, again, is based on the quality of the consciousness and not the quality of one's birth. Sat karma nippano vipro mantra tantra visharada. Sat karma, there are 6 kinds of activities for a Brahmin to perform. Sat karma nippano vipro. A vipro means Brahmin, a vipra. So, if a Brahmin, a person who is born and raised in a Brahmin family, is familiar with how to perform the 6 kinds of activities, meaning performing the yagyas, performing the rituals, etc., etc. If he knows these 6 activities, then also Sat Karma Nipano Vipro Mantra Tantra Visharada, he knows all mantras and tantras, all the different ritual, the scriptures, the verses from the scriptures, and the performance of all the tantric rituals. He knows all these things. A Vaishnava Guru Nasyad. A Vaishnava. He's not a Vaishnava. He's a Brahmin decorated with all these qualities, but a Vaishnava, Guru Nasyad. He is not qualified to be Guru. He is not qualified to hold that position simply because of his birth. Vaishnavo Svapacho Guru. But if a dog eater is a Vaishnava, and he is constantly reciting the holy name, and he is following all of the principles of Vaishnav life, Guru. He is qualified to be Guru. He is qualified to give initiation into the holy name of Krishna and into the Sampradaya. So these verses are supporting verses to this conception. It's based on consciousness. It's based on activity. Guna karma vibhagasaha. Chaturvanyam mayam shrishtam. Mayam, I have shrishta, created it. I have created the Chaturvanya, the 4 divisions of Varna and Ashrama. I created it, Krishna is saying. Why I created it? How I created it? What is the system based on? The qualifications for being in a particular Varna? What are they based on? Guna karma vibhagasaha. The quality of work. The quality of consciousness to perform that work. And that could be any particular person, no matter what his birth may be. Just like the boy in the story that we gave. I don't know who is my father, because my mother had many lovers. Okay, I will train you as a Brahmin. Because if you were in one of the other Varnas, you would have lied to me for different reasons. But because you were a Brahmin, you told me the truth. So I can understand that you have the qualities of consciousness of a Brahmin. So this is the way we judge a person position in society, the Varnashram society, based on the quality of their work and their consciousness, not on some influence of birth. Birth has nothing to do with it. The 4 divisions of human society were created by me, Krishna says. And although I am the creator of this system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. Krishna is not part of any Varna or Ashrama. Krishna is the transcendental Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all Varnas and Ashramas. So therefore, there's no question of Krishna being in a Varna or an Ashrama. He plays the role for a particular reason. And sometimes, as Lord Chaitanya, he's a Brahmin. As Krishna, he's a Vaishya. As Rama, he's a Kshatriya. As Vamandev, he's a Brahmin. So in different incarnations, when he manifests himself to establish Dharma and to remove irreligion, he will appear in the different Varnas and take up different ashrams. but he is transcendental to all of this. He is the non-doer. Now, this Varnashram system was something that was very important to Srila Prabhupada. He wanted to establish Varnashram. He talked about it near the end of his manifest pastimes in this world. And in those days, he said that 50% of my mission has been established, and the other 15% is the establishment of Varnashram. This is what I want done. So, why did Srila Prabhupada want to establish Varnashram in the West? What was so important about establishing Varnashram? Oftentimes in Srila Prabhupada's books, we read how Srila Prabhupada talked about the soul-killing civilization of the West. And we see how in modern times people don't even have time to breathe. They're so busy in their material life. They go to school so many hours a day. Then they give them homework for 3 or 4 or 5 hours every night. Then they have to do this all through high school and college. By the time they graduate college, they have debts to the university for the loans that they took out to pay for school. They have debts on their car. They have debts on their cell phones. They have insurance bills for the car to pay every month. And if they've decided somehow or other to leave their mother's house, their parents' house, and go out on their own, they have an apartment rental fee to pay as well. So in this way, we see that they're captured. They're captured and they're forced into indentured labor in which they have to work very hard for the rest of their life in order to make the money that they need just to perform the most basic activities of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So, this civilization doesn't leave us any time for spiritual enlightenment. It doesn't leave us any time for understanding the transcendental nature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It completely robs us of any opportunity to engage in spiritual activities. So, Srila Prabhupada was talking repeatedly about the establishment of Varnashram Dharma. Why did Srila Prabhupada talk about the establishment of Varnashram Dharma? Especially when we read in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Varnashram Dharma is actually rejected by Mahaprabhu. Very interesting. Mahaprabhu in the Madhya Lila, 8th chapter, verse number 57. Prabhu kahe padashloka sadhyera nirnaya raya kahe swadharma charane vishnu bhakti haya. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Ramananda Roy to recite a verse from the revealed scriptures concerning the ultimate goal of life. Ramananda Roy replied that if one executes the prescribed duties of his social position, he awakens his original Krishna consciousness. And then he quotes a verse of evidence from one of the Puranas, the Vishnu Purana. Vanashramacharya purushena parapuman Vishnuradyate panta nanyatattoshyakaranam. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu, is worshipped by the proper execution of prescribed duties in the system of Varna and Ashrama. There is no other way to satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One must be situated in the institution of the 4 Varnas and Ashramas. So in this way, Ramananda Roy poses to Mahaprabhu that this is the ultimate goal of life. And, of course, we'll see in verse 59 that Mahaprabhu says, Ehobaya. This is external. Age kaha ara. You had better tell me of some other means to achieve the ultimate goal of life. So the Varnashram system is rejected by Mahaprabhu as external. Srila Prabhupada goes through great pains in giving his purport to emphasize the point that by performing devotional service, while you are in your Varna or Ashrama, by practicing the Varnashram system and executing devotional service, that you will eventually achieve perfection and go back home, back to Godhead. And he quotes different verses to support this conception. Human society should be divided into 4 divisions: Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. And everyone should always engage in his occupational duty. The Lord says that those engaged in their occupational duty can attain perfection simply by rendering loving devotional service to the Lord while executing their particular duty. So in this way, Prabhupada delivers this view or perspective on this conception. And in the purports to the other verses, the other verse, number 58, he talks about Varnashram and the importance to attain perfection. One must make devotional service the center of life. In this way, one can awaken his natural instincts by work, association, and education. One should accept the Varnashram divisions by qualification and not by birth. Unless the system is introduced, human activities cannot be systematically executed. So, then, in verse number 60, Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, responding to Mahaprabhu's statement in verse 59, this is external, Ehobaya. He says, the Lord has said that the Varnashram Dharma is not properly executed in the age of Kali. Therefore, he ordered Ramananda Roy to go further in the matter. So now he's saying that Varnashram is not properly executed in Kali Yuga. And yet, at the end of his manifest pastimes, he insisted that it was 50% of his mission. And he wanted that 50% of the mission to be fulfilled. That 50% of his mission was not fulfilled because Varnashram had not been established. Now, in Srila Narayana Maharaj's commentary on this verse, he makes the point. By the continuous performance of Gyan Mishra Bhakti and Karma Mishra Bhakti, then gradually a special kind of realized knowledge which pertains to the topmost form of bhakti, Swarup Siddha Bhakti, awakens. Now, Gyan Mishra Bhakti means bhakti that's performed mixed with Gyan. This would be the Brahminical class and the Kshatriya class. Karma Mishra Bhakti would be the Vaishyas and the Sudras. Okay? So, of course, there's some mixture within the Kshatriyas and even the Brahmins of Karma Mishra Bhakti, but the Gyan Mishra is more prominent in the Brahminical and Kshatriya classes of people. So, Gyan refers to knowledge, not just transcendental knowledge, but knowledge of how the world works as well. And Karma Mishra Bhakti refers to activities which are done in conjunction with bhakti in order to offer the fruit of your work to Krishna. Okay. So, he says, Srila Narayana Maharaj, in this purport, that gradually a special kind of realized knowledge which pertains to the topmost form of bhakti, Swarup Siddha Bhakti. What is Swarup Siddha Bhakti? That is the process of bhakti by which we come to understand who we are as a spiritual soul in the spiritual world, what our eternal form is. Swarup means the form, our original and eternal spiritual form, and Siddha means perfect. So, how do we achieve perfection in realizing our original spiritual form from the spiritual world? This kind of bhakti can be achieved, he says, gradually by the performance of Gyan Mishra and Karma Mishra Bhakti within the confines of the practice of the Varnashram system with Bhakti Yoga. All forms of life arise from Bhagavan, and this world itself expands from him alone. Even knowledge of this makes a man favorably inclined towards Bhagavan. The supremely pure disciplic succession, or parampara, of the path of devotional service is sanctioned by Bhagavan, Bodhayana, Tanka, Dramida, Guyadev, Kaparadi, and down to Baruchi in the disciplic order. Srila Prabhupada quotes the same line in his commentary on this verse. So here we see that they are encouraging a gradual development through that it's possible to achieve a gradual development toward the goal of Swarup Siddha Bhakti by doing Varnashram and executing Gyan Mishra and Karma Mishra Bhakti. Prabhupada is proposing that, not in the exact same words, but he's proposing that point. And Srila Prabhupada repeatedly talked about how we could overcome a soul-killing civilization. How? He said, on a number of occasions, that only by going to Varnashram Dharma, for Srila Prabhupada, establishing the Varnashram Dharma farm communities was a process of establishing the culture of Bhakti Yoga, a culture by which you could practice Bhakti Yoga. The culture of the West, the culture of Krishna consciousness in the West, the practice of Krishna consciousness in the West within the context of the present materialistic society whose emphasis is on all of the four sinful activities: meat eating, intoxication, illicit sex, and gambling. All of these activities will deprive one of progress in spiritual life. They will deprive one of the possibility of executing devotional service successfully. Therefore, within the atmosphere of the modern culture of the West, Srila Prabhupada saw that the hope for achieving success in establishing Krishna consciousness in the Western world would be impeded unless we could establish the culture that supported Krishna consciousness, which is Varnashram. I was with Srila Prabhupada on the roof of his house in Bombay. He had an apartment, and if you walked up a flight of stairs, you walked up on the roof of that apartment, and you've seen videos and pictures of him sitting on his asana on the roof with the palm trees in the background and talking with me and other devotees. You'll notice that Srila Prabhupada was always very comfortable up there because there was nice sea breezes coming from the ocean, and the palm trees made it very cool. Sometimes at night, Srila Prabhupada would sit up there and chant, and I would come and sit with him, and we'd talk. On one particular night when we were talking, Srila Prabhupada was explaining to me about what had happened in India during the time of the transition from colonialism to a free, independent nation of India. And during that time, Gandhi had proposed to Nehru and Sardar Patel, who were the two politicians, a plan for the restoration of the stability of the economy for India. His plan was that all of the workers in the Congress Party would go from village to village and spend time in each village, helping each village to establish the fundamentals for self-sufficiency. That they would grow their own food, they would grow their own cotton and silk and spin cloth for clothes, they would grow their own medicines, they would grow wood to build with, to make furniture, to make homes. They would see that everyone had a home to live in, that there would be schools for education, and a place of worship for whatever religious proclivities the particular village had. And so in this way, he said, if these fundamental self-sufficient principles are established, then the economy of the entire country will be safe. Everyone will have food, clothing, shelter, education, and religious training. This is the basics. This is the fundamentals. And Prabhupada said this is what Gandhi wanted. But Nehru and Mountbatten had made a deal. Previously, the way the economy of the English Empire functioned was that they would take raw materials from the colonies, Africa, India, Australia, wherever, bring them to England, manufacture those raw materials into goods, and then ship the goods back to the country to be sold. So this engaged an economic paradigm in which people were not allowed in their own country to manufacture materials out of raw materials. They could not manufacture products out of raw materials. Raw materials had to go to England. England manufactured products. Products were shipped back, and they had to pay a higher price for them. So, England realized that this economic paradigm would not work in post-colonial England. So what they did was they retooled their factories to manufacture parts for making new factories. And now they weren't importing raw material and exporting goods. They were manufacturing, taking raw materials like steel and other metals and manufacturing parts to make factories, and then shipping the parts and the machinery to India and the colonies so they could make their own factories and produce their own materials, their own products from their own raw materials. This was the new economic paradigm. And so that meant that Nehru and Sardar Patel, in order to get freedom from England and not be a colony any longer, would have to agree with this new economic paradigm that they would purchase the materials to make factories, build the factories in the cities, engage people in working in the factories, and then using the raw materials to produce products from those raw materials for sale in the marketplace, a lot of which would be sold in England at a cheaper price, because this was the beginning of getting products made in foreign countries and then shipping them to the industrial countries. So Nehru and Sardar Patel told Gandhi, well, we can't do that. We can't establish self-sufficient villages throughout India and neglect doing the factories. Gandhi said, no, in the future, you can do the factories. First, establish self-sufficiency. Establish a situation where everyone is maintained without the factories. Then when the factories come in, some of the people can go to the factories. They'll go. But most of them will be happy if they have all of their needs met in the village. Now, Prabhupada was telling me this in 1974. And what had happened is, from the time of 1948 till 1974, while India was, this is about 25 years, India was celebrating its independence from colonial rule, people had left the villages en masse to go to the cities and work in the factories and make money. Of course, the amount of money that they were being given was very meager. And in order to make enough money to send money back home and maintain themselves there, people ended up living in tents on the streets. So what happened was you had slums and shanty towns being built up all over the main cities of Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, etc. So the people from the villages could live and work in the cities and send a meager amount of money back to the village where people could buy their needs. And the big emphasis on education, in which everyone would become very educated and everyone wanted to get a position in an office and be an office worker, and nobody wanted to work on the land anymore. By 1974, there was a massive food shortage. No one was doing agriculture. No one was growing food. People had given up producing the fundamental things to maintain and sustain life in India. And as a result, it caused a huge economic problem for India. So, Srila Prabhupada liked the idea that Gandhi had proposed. He liked the idea of self-sufficient villages. And it was his idea to do that here in America. Unfortunately, most of the devotees who joined the temples were not farmers. There was a few farmers, but mostly they were entrepreneurs, businessmen, or administrators. And so they'd get on the farm and they would make cow barns like American cow barns with equipment and, trying to milk the cows and produce a lot of milk and constantly building, getting it bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they would make little factories. They had the Yogi Bar factory, like all of these, what he makes here, the Gopal, the raw bars, The forerunner of these natural food bars was the Yogi Bar, which was made by Gaur Hari and some other devotees in Gitanagari. This was the first natural food candy bar that was made. And it was very successful. People loved it. Loved it. Very successful, very popular. But they couldn't keep up with it. Because what was happening is whatever money was being made by the company, instead of putting the money back in the company so the company could expand, develop, and grow like a company is supposed to, the profits were all going into maintaining the farm. Instead of the farm growing the food that they needed to the level that they needed it, growing all these things. They did some growing, for sure. But the problem was they were always ending up depending on financial things from outside, either collecting donations or doing a business, manufacturing something. In this way, they were always trying to get some kind of Western-style income system working for maintaining a large edifice that was built in a Western-style conception. They missed the point of what Srila Prabhupada was trying to teach us. That Varnashram is not about that. Varnashram is about living as simply as possible. I had the good fortune of living with Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj in a mud hut in Orissa, across from a small village of cowherders. We grew our own vegetables and fruits on the land. Most of what we ate, we grew. We would collect some donations and get grain from some of the farmers across the road and milk products. And so our milk products and our grains came from the village across the road, and our different fruits and vegetables and things we grew ourselves. And it was living there for 3 years and going to the villages to preach, that I got a sense of what real Varnashram is. The real concept. Not building up big barns and big factories and big this and big that. None of this. What really he was talking about, really what he wanted, was to bring it back to the basic simplicity of what was happening in the villages of India. Why? Because that afforded an individual the maximum amount of time to execute devotional service. If farming is done right, there's a few hours a day spent farming, and the rest of the time is spent doing spiritual activities. And this is what he was trying to accomplish. He wanted to implant the culture of Varnashram in the West because it was a better foundation for people to practice devotional service from. It wasn't about making Varnashram Dharma the ultimate goal of bhakti. He knew it wasn't the ultimate goal of bhakti. He even states it in his commentary, that the Lord has rejected it. But he knew that if we didn't establish the culture of Varnashram in the West, the continuous practice of devotional service in the Western world would become reduced, because we wouldn't have a culture that supported the practice of devotional service. Whatever is going on right now is mostly being supported by the Indian people who are cultured, already acculturated to the system of Varnashram. They themselves or their fathers or their forefathers grew up in villages. And they still visit those villages in India on a regular basis. And they live and work and prosper here, and it's their money that they're earning through their education that's helping to support Krishna consciousness. But the American public, white Americans, black Americans, and Hispanic Americans, are not engaged on the same level as they were during the time of Srila Prabhupada, because we haven't established a foundation for that to happen. When we became devotees, when I became a devotee in 1970, I had no responsibilities. I had no college loans. I had no car, so I had no car payments. I had no insurance payments. I had no cell phone, so I had no cell phone payments. I had no debts. I was 19 years old. I had absolutely no debt. So I just took a few pieces of clothing, walked out the door, and joined the temple. Today, they have all these debts. By the time they're 19, 20 years old, they're burdened with $40, $50, $70, $100, $200,000 worth of debt between college loans, car loans, insurance payments, cell phone payments, and apartment rentals. It's outrageous. And if you don't plan properly, you drown in it. So, Srila Prabhupada's point was, how could he establish a culture in the West that would make it easier for people to engage in Krishna consciousness without being overwhelmed by Western civilization. That was his idea. And that was why he wanted to establish Varnashram Dharma. It was to be a foundation for the execution of devotional service, a foundation by which the children and children's children and children's children's children could continually practice the process of devotional service without the interpolation of the Western civilization that depends on the four pillars of sinful karmic activities: meat eating, illicit sex, gambling, and intoxication. So therefore, if we understand this verse, Chaturvanya Mayam Shrishtam, according to the three modes of material nature and the work ascribed to them, the four divisions of human society were created by me. And although I am the creator of the system, you should know that I am yet the non-doer, being unchangeable. So here, we see that Krishna created the system for a reason, for a purpose, because it systematically organizes society in such a way that it allows people to perform devotional service with the least amount of infection of gross material consciousness. And therefore, we should try to understand the importance of this particular verse in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita for establishing Varnashram Dharma. That is, number one, based on a person's work and consciousness, not on their birth. That number two, its aim is to create self-sufficiency in society for the practice of devotional service. And therefore, it is the most practical societal model to implement for creating a basis for people in general to practice generational devotional service. In villages in India that I was in, I would see that people like Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj, the village that he came from, on his mother's side, it went back so many generations to a great personality who established a temple called Gopal Ju. On his father's side, they were initiated into a lineage that went back to Rasikananda and Narottamananda, Shamananda, Rasikananda and Shamananda Goswami. So every morning, Gaur Govinda Maharaj said, every morning I would hear the Bhagavatam being recited. Every evening I would hear the songs of Narottam Das Thakur being sung. And still to this day in that village, these same things are going on. People recite the Bhagavatam every day. They recite the Gita. They sing the songs of Narottam Das Thakur. This is the culture of Varnashram. They're all self-sufficient. They grow their own food. They spin their own cloth. They live a very simple and self-sufficient life. And the emphasis is on the acculturation of their spiritual consciousness through the process of devotional service. So this culture of Varnashram is the best cultural paradigm to establish for the practice of devotional service. This is what Prabhupada wanted for that purpose. He wanted it so that generationally people would continue to engage in Krishna consciousness in this country without cessation for the future. Now, unfortunately, we have not been able to implement it, but it is very important. And at the same time, we should remember that the establishment of Varnashram Dharma is not the goal. Living Varnashram Dharma is not the goal. It is not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is Swarup Siddha Bhakti. But it is a most perfect foundation from which to practice Swarup Siddha Bhakti. Okay, that ends the lecture for today. Now we'll do a little chanting, close out. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,